In the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming. Our primary goal tonight is to have a workshop format on economic development. One of the selectmen, three major goals are to identify a desire for and type of economic development for the town of Lunenburg. But before we start that, we have a few little business items to take care of. First, is there any public comment from the board?
No pancake breakfast tomorrow.
Right, the pancake breakfast has been postponed tomorrow. And we do have feedback that we're going to hope gets fixed. The other thing is, as we work tonight, we do have a microphone at the podium, and we have a pass-around mic that we're going to use to try to make sure that everyone is able to be heard and recorded, because this meeting is being recorded for future broadcast. Well, actually, it's going out live now, and then will be broadcast in the future on public access cable. Is there any public comment from the public? Okay. So let's get started. Our 6 o'clock appointment is the Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission's presentation on their findings and recommendations on promoting the local economy. Do you want to set that up for us, or just start?
So about back in March, we applied for a district local technical assistance grant to our Regional Planning Commission, MRPC, which we received, and we started workshops in the fall. And they've continued that process, and tonight they're going to present their findings from the meetings that we've had with businesses as well as residents on that topic of promoting the local economy and how the town can create a partnership between the town and the businesses in town. And I'd like to introduce John Hume. He's the Director of Planning and Development at Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission. And with him tonight is Karen Chapman. She's a Principal Planner at Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission. And John, if you want to, where you want to address, if you want to be at the podium.
Oh, the podium would be fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And everyone should have a copy of their report and findings.
Okay, well, thank you for having the Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission out this evening. And as Heather indicated, my name is John Hume. I'm Planning and Development Director with the Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission. And I'm here with Karen Chapman, and Molly Belanger, a regional planner, is with us as well. And we're here tonight to talk about a draft report, the handout that it looks like everybody's got a copy of it. And it's titled Formation of a Business-Town Partnership. And basically, what I'd like to do is just take about 10 minutes of your time, under 10 minutes of your time, provide a little bit of background information, which Heather touched upon, talk a little bit about the process and methodology that was used to come up with the draft report, and then go through a list of 12 bulleted recommendations that the Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission has come up with, working with Adam and Heather. So basically, I can talk a little bit about the district local technical assistance, which Heather mentioned. Back in March, the town did submit an application to look at a business-town partnership. This project is funded through the Commonwealth of Massachusetts through MRPC's District Local Technical Assistance Program. at no cost to the community. So it's not exactly a grant. However, it does pay for MRPC staff time to work on the project. And we should be getting another contract from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts over the next 2 weeks or so to continue this program and accept additional applications from our member communities, including the town of Lunenburg. So after the DLTA application was accepted by MRPC and approved by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we met with staff from the town of Lunenburg. We met with Heather, and we met with Adam, the land use director, to work on a scope of work to accomplish our goals. And it was determined that would conduct a public forum with Lunenburg businesses, plus another public forum with the local residences as well on how to promote the local economy in Lunenburg. And the purpose of the business public forum was to get ideas on how the town can work with local businesses to identify any kind of municipal gaps that the business community might see, and how the town can help better serve these businesses to make them thrive. The purpose of the residents' public forum was focused on what types of businesses that residents would like to see in town, and what barriers to business residents believe exist. So to advertise for this, the public forums, a flyer was created for the resident meeting, for the business meeting. It was in the newspaper, so it had a little bit of press. Also, the flyer was mailed out to 400 businesses throughout the community of Lunenburg, too. And flyers were posted in various spots throughout the community so that we can get as much public input as possible on this project, which is critical when you're working on something like this. So having said that, this leads into recommendations or next steps that the town could proceed with. So what we did, we took all the public input from the businesses, from the residences, looked at them, and came up with a list of next steps. These are draft next steps. So after I briefly go through each of the 12 recommendations, I'm just going to spend like 20 seconds on each one or something, and you can read a little bit more about them as we go through it too. It would be nice to open it up for public discussion, and as we discuss things tonight, maybe we'll come up with additional recommendations too. Like I said, it's in draft form. It needs to be completed by January 1st, according to MRPC's contract with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They require that we finish it on December 31st. So turning to page 2 of your handout, at the top you'll see in blue recommendations. The first recommendation is create an economic development committee. Other communities in the Montechusett region, a few others have done so, including the town of Ashburnham. We're working with them at the moment also, and it's worked out very well. And the Board of Selectmen could consider the formation of such a committee as this. And it could be beneficial if the Economic Development Committee were budgeted some funds to carry out their mission. It wouldn't have to be a large sum, but something just to carry out various tasks to promote economic development throughout the community. Then under recommendation number 2, We have encouraged the formation of a Lunenburg Business Association. When we had the business public forum, it seemed like the businesses were pretty much on board with this, and they thought that they could benefit from an association. It could bring together business owners and provide a number of benefits to the owners who elect to pay dues and participate as members. The next recommendation here, or next step, could be to create an inventory of all commercial, business, and industrial parcels, industrial zone parcels throughout the community. And not only would a database like this be very useful to potential developers if you're looking at different vacant parcels, it also shows that Lunenburg is business friendly too. A lot of businesses can be attracted to communities that desire that type of development and business. The next one, number 4, support and promote local businesses. Local businesses are very important to the community, and you really want to strive to keep those businesses in town. The town has identified a goal of supporting existing businesses and should continue these efforts to support existing business operations, large and small, to make certain that local businesses can evolve and continue to provide jobs and revenue to the town in future years. The next one, support local agricultural resources. This was important to folks who attended the business and the residents meeting, and it can help preserve the rural character of the town, which is also important to economic development as well. So you could identify and develop ways for residents to support local agricultural businesses. This could include establishing connections between farms and institutional partners such as schools to strengthen and stabilize agriculture in Lunenburg. That's one way that you could help promote agriculture throughout the community, which was identified as important to economic development. The next, that'd be number 6, that would be review adequacy of current zoning. The town should continue the review of current zoning bylaws and continue to make alterations that accommodate desired land use and development within the community. One opportunity would be to allow commercial outdoor recreation-based businesses in the rural districts, perhaps, where there are abundant natural resources and recreational opportunities, such as biking and cross-country ski rentals and things like that. That's just one thing that I'm mentioning. There are other opportunities, of course, that would arise if the adequacy of current zoning was examined in depth. The next one, on page 4 of your handout at the top, would be to prepare and distribute a promotional tourism brochure. Some communities have done that, and I had mentioned on the first recommendation maybe a small-scale budget for a proposed economic development committee if you decided that that was the way to go. Well, maybe the economic development committee could work on a project like this, and some of the budgeted funds could contribute towards a tourism brochure. So that's just one example right there. Also, recreation, history, arts, and culture should be considered economic development activities within the community, too. Moving on to 8, coordinate development activity with the owners of industrial commercial land. Most of Lunenburg's industrial commercial zone land is under private ownership. Since the town is highly unlikely to purchase land, Lunenburg planners should work in partnership with the owners of industrial and commercial land to make sure that the land is developed in accordance with the town's objectives. Next, we have number 9, work to facilitate the existing permitting process. You could consider creating a permitting guidebook to assist all customers with projects of any type and scale or that need to obtain any type of permit. I'd like to point out that MRPC's District Local Technical Assistance Program, we did put out a request for service delivery last week too. The town could apply for this. Also, we are working on a guidebook right now, a permitting guidebook for the town of Shirley to facilitate the existing permitting process. So you may want to keep that in mind as well. Next, we have sponsor annual festival, and here consider the success that some of the other regional festivals have had, like Red Apple Festival, that's on Phillipston. I'm not sure if any of you have gone to that before, but it's fantastic. Oktoberfest out by the city of Gardner, in the Fall Music Festival at Wachusett Mountain, and also the city of Leominster, too. They do quite a bit, not just an annual, well, they have probably about 4 events throughout the year, including the summer stroll and other things, fall festivals, winter festivals, and that works out good for them. I know it's a city, but a smaller community could put on something like that too, and other smaller communities have and still do. So moving on to the next page, which is page 5, we just have 2 more recommendations, next steps to go. But adopt local option for lodging. The town could choose to adopt a local increased room taxes to increase revenues to the town. And the next and last recommendation, next step, update town plans. That's very important. You could update your open space and recreation plan. We know that open space and recreation is very important in a community like Lunenburg and contributes towards economic development. Also, by putting together an open space and recreation plan, it opens up opportunities for state grants, including purchasing properties. Also, the master plan, too. I know that the community was interested in coming up with a master plan. That's a large undertaking. It can be expensive, but it can be a guide for over the next decade in terms of where you want to go with housing, economic development, open space and recreation, land use, and it'll come up with an implementation plan, too, on responsible municipal entities. And it's wonderful if you have a town planner and a master plan. It can serve as a checklist for a town planner to provide town direction on where you want to go over the next 10 years. So having said that, we can open things up to discussion. At the other 2 public forums that we had with the businesses and the residences, we get some wonderful thoughts from people, and it'd be nice if we could keep that going tonight. Like I indicated, this document that you have in your hands here, it's a draft. We can keep working on it if we come up with some other ideas tonight. Thanks.
Number 9, where you say work to facilitate the existing permitting process, are you talking about streamlining it, changing it? What do you mean by facilitating?
Okay. Actually, Karen is working for a permitting guidebook in the town of Shirley. Did you want to explain a little bit about that project?
So,
yes.
Sorry. So yeah, I am creating a permitting guidebook for Shirley, and what it is it basically takes whatever the processes are in the town and it simplifies them and gives a guide as to how you go through and how to make it easier so people know what to expect when they come in, and it makes the process smoother so that people who want to have a business, they can go through the process a lot easier. There's a guidebook. If they follow the steps, it says what each department does, what each permit is, what the process is, how many days for this, how many days for that. And it streamlines the process.
Are they reviewing their process as they're doing that, or just organizing how you do it today?
Right now, Shirley is just organizing how they're doing it. I've pointed out a couple of things to them where, this doesn't agree with that, and maybe you should change that to make it easier. Maybe you should combine this with that.
All right. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I have another question then. You mentioned adopting a local option for lodging. How many lodging units are there in Lunenburg?
None.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I think the intent for that one was if you were interested in tourism and attracting people for festivals or what have you, that, you may want bed and breakfasts, or maybe a hotel would want to open, and then you could collect the revenue from the lodging.
Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. I'm sure these are not in any order of priority, or I'm not sure, but I suspect they're not, because I think the most important one is the 12th one, and that's to generate a master plan. I mean, we have a very out-of-date master plan, and I'm not sure, from all the meetings I've been to and on these lists, I'm not sure that the residents have really come to the conclusion that they want a lot of economic development, and everything in here says form a committee to encourage economic development, encourage. I think we need to update the master plan so we can get people's opinion of how much economic development do they really want in their community, and then proceed along that. Thank you.
I agree, because when I look at the Board of Selectmen goal, it says identify the desire for and type of economic development. So we really haven't even done the first step of identifying the desire for economic development. I see that in many instances the town has, as Bob had mentioned earlier, we could have had I-190 going through Lunenburg and chose not to have that happen. We could have had a new gas station and chose not to have that happen. People wanted to have a festival this summer, and that was really difficult to have happen. So I really don't see an outcry for a lot of economic development. And you could live in Leominster. Leominster is bursting at the seams. There's lots of things going on, but I actually like driving around Lunenburg and seeing the rural nature of our town.
I think one of the important things to take from this is you want to support your existing businesses. There's some great businesses here in Lunenburg, and if, as a first step, you support them, get them to group together, get them to work with the town to work with them, it's a good first step. And while you're doing that, you can be doing a master plan, getting the public involved, seeing what they really want, but focus on the existing businesses that are here now.
Oh, no, I totally agree with that, but you know, you're saying as a first step. What's the second step? I don't know that we've identified what our goal is yet.
Well, and that's a great reason for a master plan.
Oh, no, I definitely think we need to update the master plan. I'm not arguing with that at all. That's overdue.
So I think in response to Phyllis's comment about the Economic Development Committee, I think a lot of times we focus on economic development as let's bring in Google, let's bring in Amazon, or let's hit a home run with a giant office park. And economic development is a three-pronged approach. It's attraction, retention, and expansion. So maybe attraction is we're only attracting small-scale businesses. We have commercial areas in town that are underutilized and probably not as vibrant as they could be. Not that they need to be, Main Street in Leominster or the Whitney Field Mall, but that could be higher and better used. And retention, we want to keep the businesses that are here. Mm-hmm. They're bringing tax dollars in, they're providing employment, they're providing services. And expansion, some of these businesses in town want to stay where they are, and they want to be able to grow, and maybe not exponentially, maybe just small expansions. And we've seen that over on Electric Ave. Attraction, Unitil has come to town, and they've invested tens of millions of dollars with very little requirement of service provision from the community. So I think that the Economic Development Committee isn't necessarily something that has to be out there beating the bushes for new development all the time. It's more a recognition that the town is looking and realizing that there is a business community and looking to provide some service, some manner of recognition and assistance. And I think that what that is and the breadth of it and what their functions are would be informed by things like the master plan and general consensus and some of the zoning review and those sorts of things.
So it almost feels like those other things should come before the economic.
And I don't disagree. And I'm not saying that things have to happen in the 1 to 12 order that they are in the recommendations. I just think that we shouldn't write off an economic development committee because we may not want to look to attract large business. There's still a business community. There's still needs within the community for business and for servicing the businesses that exist. And, maybe we keep doing what we're doing, and the Economic Development Committee is just an outreach and a sounding board and some sort of connection between the regulatory process and the businesses.
So that would be a different mission statement than...
It may be. I think that, again, this is a recommendation. And I say this with anything, master plans, open space plans, any sort of plan. You write these recommendations as here's where we start, and they're all living documents. You don't have to do exactly what's written. It's a basis for, and then as you gather information and as you move forward, things shift and are fluid and change with what the desires and needs are.
And there's more to economic development than even, small businesses. There's plenty of people who work from home, and we've just now started to identify the assets that those businesses have and start taxing them for capital gains. That's a new funding source that weren't really identifying or chasing before. So businesses that exist and need support but don't necessarily take up space or put demand on the town still deserve some kind of recognition and support from the town. Mm-hmm.
My name is Dave Rogers. I live at 82 Highland Street. I have some questions and also some concerns. The first question I have is I would like the Board of Selectmen or the town, Adam, to talk to us about the thought process that came forth when we, as a town, rezoned the center of our town with the ultimate idea or goal that it would spur economic development in the form of smaller businesses, and maybe those to include residential on the upper floors and retail on the bottom floors, and to see what the thought process was all about that and how that ties into economic development. The second thing, and probably it's my opinion, but I'm convinced that Lunenburg is not a destination. It's a great community, but there's nothing that necessarily draws someone to come here and spend money economically. Suffice it to say, for me, I can find whatever I need in a 15 to 25 mile radius of our town. And one of the constraints that we have to deal with here in Lunenburg is parking. We're constrained by close proximity to parking, and that is a deterrent from my perspective. So with that in mind, it seems to me that the last meeting that we had when we talked about over at the school, I thought that was a very good meeting. And from that meeting, I got the sense that people would support festivals and that sort of thing, cultural affairs and the Stillman Farm situation, et cetera, et cetera. So that might be a way of doing it. But I'd like, in recap, to find out what the thought process was in terms of the center of town and why there was a big push to rezone that, and what really, in conjunction with economic development, that kind of operation entails. Thank you.
So, well, it's kind of a broad question, and I came into the village district probably about 2/3 of the way through. They had the town was on probably draft 4 or 5 when I began working here, and the planning board had been working on it for probably about 18 months prior to that. So I'm going to use anecdotal information and, some of what I've taken in from that process, and I'll, look to maybe Damon and Matt, who were on the board at the time, that may be able to give a little bit further information. I think what the impetus for the village district was, it was a recommendation in an economic development element that was to be inserted in the master plan that was worked on beginning in 2013, and I think it may have predated even that. I think there was a hope that it would spur economic development in some manner. I think that you've been at a lot of these forums, and I know a lot of people in the room have, and there's been a lot of discussion about stemming the tide of the tax rate and making it more affordable for people to live here. And I think that was potentially part of it. I don't think that was the driving force. I think the driving force was looking at the center, looking at the investment the town was looking to make in the new school, and creating an area that brought some vibrancy back to the center of town, where the municipal government is, where the crossroads of town are. And I know that there's been some statements that the center of town is shifting and it's moving in different places based on what's happening, but it's still fairly proximal to the Main Street, Lancaster Ave, Mass Ave intersection. So taking that area and creating the ability to inject business creates the potential for additional retention of people down here, service provision for the people who are coming down here. And I think in the process, what the board looked at was, we don't want to change the character of the center of town. We don't want CVS and Walmart and Home Depot, and we don't want this to be, you know, a big built-up area, but we want to allow for things that people would use while they're here to be here in a reasonable way. And I think that's where a lot of the mixed use and a lot of the floor area requirements came from. 5,000 square feet is the maximum for any commercial use on any floor. And that's a fairly large building. But it's not excessive, and it doesn't necessarily go against the fabric of what's down here already. And I think in recognition of retention of the character, the fabric, the feeling of this area, the board worked with the Historical Commission to create the Architectural Preservation District. I know that there are some people who don't necessarily agree with all of the tenets of that, but the intent was there to allow for the commercial development without the massive changing of building facades and appearances, and keeping that residential sort of look, but allowing for commercial operation. I don't know if that gets to what you're looking for, but that's my general understanding of what the impetus and drive behind it was.
And I'll just add a little bit to that. It's when I first started on the planning board, I think that was 6 years ago now. Even someone before I joined the board had initiated, again with MRPC, you guys did a study for us about forming a village center district and using some of the state recommendations to do that. And the presentation for you guys was one of the first things that I experienced on the planning board. And also at the time, I was on the Historic Commission and had really learned a lot about businesses that had existed in the center of town and don't exist there anymore, and just a cross-section of different services that were offered that are no longer offered. And digging into planning, realizing that before the formation of the village district, all the commercially zoned land in the center of town was owned by literally one person. So there was no competition, no way to get into the market unless it was his way or the highway. So trying to create a diversity, trying to create opportunities, and try to get back some of the life that had been lost in the center of town because the zoning previously was very exclusive and didn't provide a lot of opportunities for people in town. And again, we held multiple workshops, had public comment, and there was a real desire from citizens of the town to have a more vibrant downtown and offer more services and be able to provide more to the people of the town. Again, I don't think there was ever a real push to say, hey, we're going to be a big destination town. We're going to get everyone to come visit scenic center of Lunenburg, but to provide just a more pleasant place for the people who live here to enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Well, I understand what you just said, and I certainly agree with that. However, I happen to think that there were some things that were done in the center of town just recently with the Lunenburg gardeners in the summertime. I mean, they do a phenomenal job. And the transition to a Santa's Village kind of thing is fantastic. I happened to see on Facebook a picture of the gazebo with the Christmas tree and the snow. I mean, it was absolutely fantastic. So insofar as I'm concerned, I don't want to come across as being negative with this, and if we can do it, that's fine. But I am driven to other places that I can get things on a very limited basis. I mean, and I question whether a sustainability is possible, but the market will tell us that, I think, and that's a market-driven kind of a thing. But we have some innate drawbacks with the parking and that sort of thing, but they have to be addressed. If I could offer a recommendation in terms of economic development going forward, the first and foremost thing that I would suggest is that we take care of what we have. Make sure that we work vigorously with the existing businesses that are here, and to accommodate them and to help them and to make sure that they have everything that they need to prosper. because that is to me, very, very important. We keep talking about the agricultural aspect of our town, and I think that's very important. I truly do. But in terms of economic development, I don't see any exponential kind of a growth in that area. We've got the orchards and those kinds of things, and they're great seasonally, and that's fun and it's great. But I don't see any substantial uptick in that area. What I see is taking care of what we have, realizing what we have, nurturing what we have, and trying to move forward with folks that want to expand or start a new business and make it easier for them. Thank you.
I just add a thought to how we can expand agriculture and actually make that grow in a meaningful way. And one of the big ways to add value, to add growth to agriculture, is to allow farmers to add value to their products, because most of them just produce a raw good, but if they're able to turn apples into apple cider or lettuce into salads and sell that, I mean, adding value to the product, turning it around, selling it in a restaurant, something like that, or selling it, in a retail fashion that makes what they grow more than just something that came out of the ground. That's something that can add jobs, that can add, viability to the farms and sustain them, and create some great locally produced things for people to consume in town.
I would just add to that we have a number of farmers that sell, in addition to food, they sell goods. So whether it be soaps, or whether it be sweaters, or whether it be handcrafted items, I think we do have to take care of the businesses that are here, and those businesses are here. There are a number of people on Facebook that are advertising goods that they sell year-round. It's not a seasonal situation. And I think if there are things that we can do to improve that business and to get it out to more of our citizens, I think that would be great. I think one of the first things we need to do is meet with those individuals and see if there's a true interest and if it is a viable option and if it's something they're interested in. But I think those are businesses that are here that we can potentially help.
Hi, Matthew Allison, 305 Flat Hill Road. I've been touting agriculture for 3-4 years now, and I'm very glad that everybody else is starting to talk about it. That's great. Worcester County is nationally acclaimed for numerous items within agriculture, and Northern Worcester County is practically #1 in Worcester County. And that would be our draw. That is national acclaim. To add value, we need a commercial kitchen. The TCP kitchen would be an awesome start. We've had an opportunity to get a residential kitchen registered. That allows us to make non-potentially hazardous food. You can't make stuff that can't sit on the counter all day. The number of farms in Lunenburg has increased over the last 20, 30 years. The size has considerably decreased. There are more farmers, there are more people. The last number I remember hearing was 20 individuals in town, or couples. At least one of the two is dedicated, doesn't have a 40-hour-a-week job, stays at home and farms, takes care of animals, raises crops, does whatever farmers do. And the state regulations have reduced the size requirement to 2 acres. Right now, Lunenburg has a minimum of 5 acres. On top of that, you have to have whatever your minimum zoning acreage requirement is. So if you're Res A, you need 6 acres. If you're Res B or outlying, you need 7 acres to have a farm. So addressing zoning bylaws, yes. The other thing, I don't think we have any commercially zoned area in the center of Lunenburg. I think it's limited business and residents with the overlay, the 2A overlay. That is a great thing. And we don't necessarily, economic development might be, kind of one of those technical terms that everybody doesn't get into, but economic growth. If we don't grow, we will just become a bedroom community. There will, anybody that lives here will go out of town to get their services, to get their products, to do stuff. I think we should stop focusing on trying to be a national draw and just try to get a local draw. You know, try to get people in town to find, oh, I can get this at my neighbor's over here, or I can go down the street and get this, or and that is and I've been to I think all of these meetings that we've had, and the resounding overall theme that I heard was everybody needs to learn, to understand, and I understand that there has been in development a business listing, a business directory, and one of the already we had in planning board, I'm also on planning board, sorry, we had an application for the One Main Street. They're going to make a nice big sign to actually advertise every individual business, and there might only be a handful of them in a big empty building, but they're going to start advertising, and that I think was a plus. So these meetings, they're great, and this town is great, and the people here are great, but we just have to get a dialogue going, and thank you.
Dave Procopy, 733 West Street. I'm also a member of the planning board. I just wanted to say I think this is a great first step, what you guys put together. And it's all of these disparate opinions, views. I think this is why we need a committee that's more focused on just these issues. We have the Ag Committee, but the Ag Committee doesn't talk to the people at the center of the town. The center of town wants more support, but they have nobody that they can go to. So you have all of these different concerns, and there's no one group that's taking charge and saying, okay, I got to get a little bit from these people, I got to get a little bit from these people, and then I got to, to make something happen. And that's why I think we need the committee. I agree with Mr. Rogers and others that again, I think this is a great document, but the support is what I think we need to start with. The underpinnings for the local businesses. There's a lot of things that we're not doing, especially with, for instance, the website. We're not supporting people coming in, which we could be doing. And once we get the use table clarified, we could link that on the website to the guide, if we come up with a guide that explains the process of permitting and everything else, so that people can just go there and get a better understanding of what it means to join the community of Lunenburg. What can I expect? I don't think that really exists on a couple of nice photographs on there, but you're really kind of, you got to dig to figure out what you're getting into in this town. So that's all.
Hi, Marie Martin at 54 Longwood Drive. I have very little voice tonight, but I just wanted to share a concern because I made the mistake the other night of going to dinner at the exact same time the tree lighting ceremony was going on. And I was going to dinner in the center of town at the pizza place, and there was no place to park. And I was searching around, and then I realized what was going on. So, I went in to support their business, and there was very little people in there. And part of the reason is parking. They just, do takeouts, and they're trying desperately to get people to actually come in and sit down. But parking is a huge concern. That's what they shared with me when I was in there. The other thing I noticed that when I was walking back, the tree lighting ceremony had finished, and there were parents that were very concerned with their children's safety walking back from the tree lighting ceremony. And, they had a really good time at the tree lighting ceremony, but our open space, talking about open space, and having this activity with families was right between two roads at rush hour with all these cars whipping by. I heard one parent yell because a car almost, sideswiped them as they were walking back to their car. So I just want to bring that out as a concern that we need to address. Thank you.
So I want to thank MRPC for their work on this. and everyone who attended the forums received a lot of great feedback from residents and businesses. And the overarching theme that I see in this is that it is an effort to support our local businesses. And an economic development committee, like someone mentioned, doesn't have to be to attract big business. It can be to support and let our existing businesses grow. And encouraging a business association. There was definitely a desire for that at those meetings. And that in itself will help support each other. And items such as supporting the local agricultural resources, that could be done through the Economic Development Committee as well. And updating the town plans. These are items that we need to do anyways. So I think there's a lot of value in this report that we can grow on. So it's a good starting point. And it's run concurrently with the goal the selectmen set of identifying economic development. And I think it will help define that vision. Thank you.
Well, again, it's to identify the desire for,
right,
first and foremost.
And just to add to why I think we need to support business development and support our local businesses is the reason I got involved with town politics all those years ago is I just graduated from college, just studied architecture, actually wrote my thesis on Lunenburg and the thesis was called "How Do We Go Home?" Thinking about how a college kid returns from school in a city or somewhere else and tries to live back in a rural community. And one of the big things I identified wrong with the town is when you look at the charts and graphs, just the age brackets of town, the curve, there's virtually nobody between the ages of 20 and 30 living here. And you also look at how far people drive to work. And most people drive over a half hour or more to get to work. Nobody works around here. So if you want to have a sustainable community that's, open for the people who grew up here to actually come back and live here and care about the town and give back to the town, you need to create some type of opportunities for them. Because for me to graduate from school in the middle of the recession, not have a job, college loans like crazy, I lived with my parents for 4 years before I bought a house. I gave up a lot of things, opportunities to work in the city because I really cared about living here and wanted to give back to my community. Now, I'm a really stubborn person, and it worked for me, but most people aren't going to do that. So it's just, to be sustainable, to be a place that our own kids that we invest so much money in through the educational system, to try to retain some of that, those assets that we've invested in our kids, we need to create some type of opportunities, whether it's, again, I've never heard anyone say they want another strip center or want another office park, but to support small businesses, home businesses, opportunities like that, is something that I think is a responsibility of ours to take care of the kids.
And I just want to add to that MRPC had done a report. I saw some people kind of raise their eyebrows about the demographics that you just talked about, but those are reflected in the report that MRPC did. If you look at the age brackets overall of the town and the average commute time that people are doing, exactly what Damon just said. What I've gained through all of these workshops is there's a number of concerns that I think we have to talk about. We have to talk about our sidewalks, our walkability in the center. We have to talk about our recreational opportunities and our open space, and we have to talk about supporting our businesses. And I think that's all can be done through these recommendations that MRPC has put together. I think that those really are the cornerstones to addressing all of those issues. I do just want to mention when we talk about sidewalks and walkability and parking, we are starting, the MPO is starting on the next tip next month. So if there are things that we want to look at in the next year or two, or even 3 or 4, that we want to look at putting in sidewalks, or we want to look at repaving roadways or complete streets, we need to really start thinking about that now, or we're going to miss another 3-year tip. So we really have to get going on that if that's something we really want to incorporate and look for funding for.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I could, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank the Board of Selectmen and Adam and the town manager and the folks from MRPC for coming forth and at least starting this dialogue. I think you've done a great job in terms of organizing this, and I think the main thing that we have to do is just continue to talk and explore alternatives, share different ideas, and hopefully we will gradually overcome these bumps in the road or obstacles that really we can. Lunenburg is a great town. It's made up of great people with great facilities, and they have some great ideas. So if we continue to work together, I'm sure that we will be able to go onward and upward. And in closing, on behalf of the Rogers family, I'd like to wish everyone a happy holiday season and to take advantage of the center here. Thank you so much.
We're not closing yet, though. That was the first part of tonight's workshop, is to hear from MRPC and the feedback from some of the forums that we've done to date. At this point, we're going to move into a broader workshop that you're all welcome to stay for. In fact, hopefully that's why you're here, where we join. We don't have quorums from either the Planning Board or the Sewer Commission, but as part of our charter, when we talk about economic development, it is a joint effort of the town that includes the Selectmen, the Planning Board, the Sewer Commission, and obviously the public. And we have some thoughts that we'd like to begin to kick off as we define economic development and ask you to be a part of the rest of this workshop. But Mr. Daniel?
Yes, I just had one comment. As a small business owner in town, and as I'm sitting here listening to questions about how we can support a small business in town, one of the things that I've heard is that we figured out a way to tax a small business additionally. The other thing is I was hoping at some point in time we could hear from MRPC how other towns have helped small businesses. What are some specific tangible things that have helped a small business? I know that walkability probably would be helpful because you're getting more traffic by that business, but I hope at some point in time, and I don't mean to derail your program here, but I hope we can talk about what are some specific things that other towns have done to help the small business.
To give another plug for the planning board, we're going over the bylaws all the time, and we're talking about the use table right now. We've had several meetings over the last year on issues, especially with regard to businesses in the village district, and they're not very well attended. So if any input you can give us goes back into the work that we're doing. So if we know that people want something in the center or not in the center, then that's helpful to us when we get to redefining everything as we go along. So that's one thing we can do, and together, if we keep the input and keep the conversation going, the more we know, the better the end product's going to be.
Katie Adams from Williams Drive, and I just wanted to share a very small story on the idea of support that keeps coming up. And I think some of it falls on the residents and not just on the government in terms of taking the responsibility of supporting. So the story would be on Facebook. I think I saw it today, but it was something this weekend that took place at the Dragonfly Cafe. Somebody had hosted a birthday party there, and they made a beautiful post about what a success the party was, how gracious the owner was, and really recommending that other people consider using that. And that was him taking on the responsibility as a resident to share a story, to promote a local business. And so I think it can't come from a a specific place, but it has to be something we all sort of choose to do on our own. And so I think looking at that post and thinking, oh, using that space for an event or a party, what a good idea. That supports her and it supports business, and that came from just another resident, not from government. So it's just a story. Thank you.
Well, one thing that I wanted to mention about what MRPC has done for other communities, I was just going to mention one thing that I think is important, because I keep hearing the subject of walkability come up. The Montechusett Regional Planning Commission, we have a transportation staff, and we also have a program called Unified Planning Work Program. And for the town of Groton and a few other communities, we've done walkability studies for the community. In Groton a couple of years ago, we even did a downtown walk with all the folks, looked at all the crosswalks, the street, and the layout of the downtown. So the town of Lunenburg could apply to Montechusett Regional Planning Commission's Transportation Department for such a study. So I wanted to mention that too.
Let's move into this part of the workshop, and then we'll be able to open it up for conversation again.
Jamie, can I just add one short thing? That is that under the Unified Planning Work Program, they also do parking studies. There's a recent community that just is doing a parking study. So all of these studies that we're talking about and planning that we need to do, really, we can look at MRPC to help us with, and the whole TIP process and the Unified Work Program.
Great. So tonight's workshop was a topic that leads right from the report that MRPC just did on economic development. And we asked, we had our first meeting in September, first workshop on this topic with the planning board, and at that meeting asked the sewer commission to attend as well, because that's part of their charge, is to look at future growth. So one of the goals that the selectmen identified was to identify the desire for and type of economic development for Lunenburg. And does the town want economic development? The discussion at the September 12th meeting centered on different types of economic development that may preserve the attributes that make Lunenburg unique, such as ecotourism, promotion of our farms, and promotion of our artist community and craft community. Some possible detractors for doing business in Lunenburg that were discussed at that meeting were high electricity costs, lack of high-speed internet, the water and sewer infrastructure, and lack of identified locations to open a business. And the next steps identified at that meeting were to include the sewer commission in the next workshop and work towards a defined vision for economic development and whether or not we want that. So some of the goals to look at for this meeting is to discuss the proposed next steps of the MRPC report on promoting the local economy, such as creation of an economic development committee and update the master and open and recreation space plan. Get input from the Sewer Commission on their master plan for growth and development, and discuss the long-range strategic plan with other land use bodies. Discuss the role of local chambers of commerce, and we have Chris McDermott here from North Central Chamber of Commerce tonight. Develop a survey to solicit public input on what, if any, development residents want. That was also discussed and brought up at the September meeting. And are there any zoning or bylaw changes necessary to achieve these any identified goals? So an economic development committee was touched on the MRPC report. Could be to provide input and advice on the town's economic development opportunities, such as ways to support existing businesses, the creation of new employment opportunities, and the attraction of new investment, but it doesn't necessarily have to be just that. It can be just to support our existing businesses if that's what's identified the town desires. and provide advice to the selectmen on economic development policy, and develop a specific target for economic development. That could be one item in particular, make one thing a goal, such as, and this may not be a realistic one, but identify the gas station that is a property that you'd like to develop and get back on the tax rolls, and coordinate with the master plan committee. The composition could include a selectman, a planning board member, a sewer commission member, the land use director, and 3 at-large members, just to give you some idea of what that committee could look like. Update the master plan and open space plan. The last master plan was done in 2002, so it's recommended that it be updated every 10 years. The planning board would appoint a master plan steering committee per Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81D, and could consist of 1 planning board member, a selectman, 3 at-large, and the land use director as an ex officio member. The last open space plan was covered 2011 through 2014, and we could reassemble the open space committee, which was 1 planning board member, 2 conservation commission members, and 2 at-large members. The process of updating both of these plans will provide feedback from the stakeholders and public participation to identify a vision for economic development, if any, specifically our recreation, conservation, and natural assets. And we'd work on implementing these goals in the master plan and open space recreation plan in the future. So at this point, we had asked the Sewer Commission to attend tonight's meeting and to discuss the master plan for future growth and development policies, and what, if any, benefits there are to expanding the sewer infrastructure. So I believe Carl is here. Carl and Troy Daniels.
Oh, I get to stay here? Oh, great. No, I'm okay here. Yeah, I don't have a lot prepared, but there are 3 particularly relevant documents that I'll refer to, and there is a handout for people, so I won't read the whole things. But the high-level one is the town charter, which defines the Board of Sewer Commissioners' roles and responsibilities. And the one relevant paragraph to this discussion is the Board of Sewer Commissioners shall develop a comprehensive or master plan for a town-wide system of sanitary sewers, setting forth in graphical and textual form policies to govern the future growth and development of the entire town. The Board of Sewer Commissioners shall, in conjunction with other land use bodies, assist in developing a long-range strategic plan for guiding town growth and development. To that end, basically the Sewer Commission's master plan, if you want to call it that, is our comprehensive wastewater management plan that was put together, I think initially released in 2010, was taken to town meeting and reviewed at town meeting and voted to accept by the town. It was just updated in 2016. The update did not really address development at all. There were some other things that it did address. But relative to this, the most significant part of that comprehensive wastewater plan, because when it was started probably 3 years before, I think it took almost 3 years to do this plan, there were 2 areas in town that were identified by the planning board as growth management districts, which would be targeted areas that the town would use and try to direct commercial industrial development to. One was down on Chase Road, and then one was over off of Reservoir Road, where the development is now, or Powell's, and that basic area of town. Early in the process, the planning board had second thoughts about the Chase Road one, and that was removed from our comprehensive wastewater plan, or our master plan. So what is currently in the master plan regarding supporting development is what we call the Area 25 of our zoning of our sewer service area. So that's in the sewer service area, Area Area 25. It's included in the town, this area is included in the town's growth management district for commercial and industrial development. The area is zoned as office park/industrial. The town is considering encouragement of commercial and industrial development in this area. The planning board continues to review this area for growth potential in regards to commercial and industrial development. The recommended management alternative for this area must manage flows large enough to attract commercial and industrial development and should be able to meet the requirements to treat industrial wastewater. As I said, the other area 26 was removed, from the plan at the planning board's request. The other relevant document that is required by our charter is a development policy. So the official development policy, which is in the Sewer Commission's regulations, states that a guiding principle of the Sewer Commission is to determine the most effective method of providing service to existing and new developments where alternative on-site solutions are not able to meet local and state health and environmental requirements. It is not the intent or goal of the Commission to control or enable development. So those are the relevant documents that are in place. There was a draft of the economic development element for the master plan back in 2014 that the commission made inputs to, but that I don't think that ever went anywhere. So if it's interesting, we can get into those comments during the discussion. The only thing I'd like to say before turning it back here is that we don't have a quorum here tonight. This commission did not have the opportunity to have any discussion on tonight's meeting because of our schedules and this schedule and the timeliness between the two. So there, other than what's documented by the commission, the documents I referred to are all, approved by the commission and released by the commission. Beyond that, I and Mr. Daniels are here representing as representatives of the commission, but not speaking on behalf of the commission because we have had no discussion. So our positions will be our own, and hopefully they'll be constructive and help the process. And the last thing I will say along that line is Joan Pease, who is a member of the commission, unfortunately really wanted to make it here tonight, but could not, and she asked me to just read her input for your consideration during the session tonight. It says, and this is from Joan Pease in an email. I asked her if she had any inputs to bring in, so that's where it starts. Thanks, Carl. I am taking dinner to my daughter and her family tonight and will not be able to attend. I did some research, and although I do not have formal economic training, I read some articles on the economic capacity of a town or city. It appears that communities have characteristics which limit the type and amount of economic development. My recommendation is that the town hire a professional to do an analysis of Lunenburg to determine what type and how much economic growth the town can successfully carry before setting forth any plan. However well-intentioned, untrained volunteers are, without proper advanced research and planning, their suggestions can produce poor long-term results at best and failures at worst. It is my understanding that firms exist that the town can employ to produce an analysis of what type of economic and how much economic growth a town can support. This would be a starting point. If I were to attend the meeting, I would share this opinion. Joan.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Sure. I appreciate Carl's input, and I just want to say again, and I've said this, I kind of sound like a broken record, but I just want to say it one more time. We have to be careful when we talk about expansion of the sewer, in my opinion, because although we may be trying to do a good thing, there can be unintended consequences. Sewer allows very dense development, whereas on-site sewer septic does not. So we need to be very careful when we talk about expanding the sewer system. We also are a community of lakes. We have two sub-watershed basins that are medium stress basins, which means they're net exporters of water, meaning they send out more water than they bring in. So there's an environmental component to that as well. So we want to be very careful about expansion. And the Sewer Commission, when they did the comprehensive wastewater management plan, were very mindful of that. So I'm not against expansion, but if we do decide to do that, we need to do it very, very carefully, in my opinion.
Hang on. Please use the microphone, Troy. Okay, great.
Troy Daniels, 94 Main Street, also a sewer commissioner. One of the charges in the town charter is policies, and one of the concerns that I have, and we're talking about very broad, expansive development ideas or prospects when we're talking about developing a whole street on, for instance, Chase Road or anything like that. And I share some of the concerns that Mr. or Ms. Bertram brought up about sewering the whole town. The other concern I have is the failure to develop policies that affect small businesses. And I think this is an area where we can help as a sewer commission, and that we need to develop further, and that we need to develop policies. And I can think of a small business in town that has had to go through multiple meetings just to get a small answer on, and we've not developed policies around that decision, policies around what it would take for that small business who's already in the sewer service area. So, and whenever you say sewer service area, that's already been identified as an area that is sewerable, if that's a real word. At any rate, that's my major concern with regard to small businesses in town and the difficulties that they have in order to get a business off the ground and up and running in the town of Lunenburg.
I just wanted to offer a point of history. So the charter was adopted this most recent version about 10 years ago, and it may have incorporated the sewer commission language from before that about sewering the entire town. And when that was some of the theory for many of the town officials at that time, that there's no street that will be left undone. And I was out of town during the time when the town meeting, at several contentious town meetings, basically said, whoa, we don't want to do that. So I think that when we look at the benefits and costs of expanding, the question becomes, there is sewer already in Pioneer Drive going into Leominster. At the time, they didn't want to extend it into Lunenburg because they wanted to keep the business in Leominster. So the question becomes, since we don't have our own sewer treatment plant, is how far would Leominster and Fitchburg be willing to extend into Lunenburg for capacity purposes, recognizing that that effectively may take business away from them. I know Lancaster is going through that issues for their water and sewer. Mrs. Bertram had talked about the costs. When you have sewer, you basically can have any development that can come through at that point, which may be good or bad. And then we need to talk about the environmental costs as opposed to an on-site system that recharges the wetlands.
I'd also voice my concern for expanding sewer for the sake of economic development, especially up in that Chase Road area. I think the type of development that it would encourage is not the type of development we've ever heard in any one of our outreach programs or any public comment that I've ever heard. Again, strip mall, shopping centers, stuff like that. The type of development that Chase Road is zoned for, basically because it's a main road, and I understand why they zoned it that way. But again, it's not the type of image and identity that people want from their town. And I think developing the small businesses, developing the walkable nature of the center of the town, and making that a good place to be is the better direction for economic development. And that already has sewer and can meet those needs. And again, Chase Road, not walkable, not, it's not a community back out there. It's just a stretch of highway.
And from an environmental standpoint, there's a number of woods, there's trails, there's, if we were to extend a sewer there for economic development, again, the potential unintended consequences is very large-scale developments. So I think we need to be careful, and I personally would not be in favor of doing something like that.
Yeah, no, I think the question is not, as well as what are the benefits, what are the disadvantages? What are the costs? What are the disadvantages? And there's a great many disadvantages.
I was just going to say, that's why that bullet point was on there, is the costs may outweigh the benefits. So, but it's identifying what each are.
Okay, I support everything that we just said, but so I want to just maybe move forward. The things to take into account, most of the areas that we're talking about development are already have sewer available, so it's not a limiting factor by any means. However, we should take into account the fact that if there is an area that, for economic development reasons or whatever development reasons, that is not sewered, or even worse, is not in the sewer service area, which is approved by the town, there's a time factor that has to be taken into account in any timing. It takes quite a while. If it's in the sewer service area and it's an extension, then it's maybe a couple of years by the time you get everything done. If it's not in the sewer service area, we need to do all our homework, but then go to town meeting and get the town where they could bring up the kind of points we just had, and we'd have to do all our homework. But the town would have to approve it at town meeting. Then we would proceed. So, add maybe another year to the process. And then the worst case is we want to, particularly if we're on the Fitchburg end, we send our wastewater primarily to Leominster, but a reasonable amount to Fitchburg, to a kind of from 13 down, and some electric Ave goes to Fitchburg. We have limited capacity at Fitchburg. We just redid the IMA with them. It took us 3 years to get this IMA to buy some more capacity from Fitchburg. So if you want to go into that area, we then have to go open up IMA discussions to get capacity from Fitchburg. So there's another, several years. So just from a timing point of view and location, what's in the sewer service area already, where are their pipes in the ground, and is there capacity available where that sewerage would end up, and of course, who's going to pay for it. So those are the things we should take into consideration in the planning process.
So the good thing, as Carl talked about with the Fitchburg area, the capacity was calculated based on the current zoning in the area that was available. So the land next to Mackey's Home Center, where the yard sale is, flea market, that could be developed within there, and the zoning for that was calculated within the development behind Walmart, other land that was already zoned commercial. So we would probably be okay, but if we then say we want to do something different and expand zoning at a higher density that might use more water, then that's a different discussion. So if you wanted to put in a brewery that used a lot of water, then that's a different discussion.
Yeah, I guess I have questions about that, because when the comprehensive wastewater management plan was done, we looked at the existing zoning, but the village overlay district didn't exist then. So the question that I would have, if even with the zoning change that we've done, which allows multi-use in buildings, and we're talking about our town center and potential, either fostering existing businesses and expanding that, or potentially adding new business, what kind of capacity? I mean, that would be a good question for us to be able to know, or know the answer to, is what kind of capacity do we have?
Yeah, fortunately, with Leominster, we have a tremendous amount of excess capacity in our agreement with them. So we just need to make sure that agreement stays current. We have like 500,000 gallons.
Center goes to Leominster?
Center goes to Leominster. Yeah, about the only thing that goes to Fitchburg is the very end of Electric Ave towards Fitchburg.
Okay.
And then kind of from Walmart down to the Highfield Village area that may or may not be developed goes to Fitchburg, but that, as Bob said, we've taken into account, building out what we know about in that area, but if we go outside of that area, we have a problem. Leominster, I think we probably, maybe we use a couple 100,000 gallons of the 500,000 gallon capacity we have, so it'll be a while before we have a limit there, but thanks for thinking of that.
So along the same lines, Carl, Dave Brockview, 733 West Street, Planning Board. Is that something, and number one, is it something that if we exceed capacity, what is the issue? We get billed? We get surcharged or something?
No. Our agreement is capped at a capacity. So
shut you down?
Yeah, you won't be able to connect anyone. Once you reach your capacity, we would not be able to allow a connection.
Oh, we won't be, okay, so they won't allow anything. That's
right,
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if all of a sudden everybody already on the system doubles their usage and we go over, then there's another question. But
right, okay, that's what I was after.
Likely it wouldn't be that. It would be a development or something big happens, and we just say, sorry, small business, there's no capacity.
Well, so in pursuit of this effort, though, to support local businesses in the zones that we already have established, is it possible that we could get some feedback from you in terms of what kind of capacity is available, so that we can
yeah, absolutely. I
include that on the website and interconnect, you know what I mean, so that anybody coming in understands that there are limitations and who to talk to.
There were a number of things in that other response to the 2014 draft, and that was certainly one of. There were three big concerns that the Sewer Commission fed back. One was making sure it was sort of a information sharing with businesses, and to set something up like it's being talked about here, so businesses know what they're coming into. And capacity was one of them. Our fees was another. To Mr. Daniels' point, people get surprised when they see the fees. They think they're a small business, but they're using a ton of water. That can be an issue. So, and I forget what the third one was, but we can make that available, and because we track it, we know exactly what goes there, and 500,000 is the number. So it's pretty easy to identify.
I think it also goes to when we look at any potential use in any part of the town, that we look at what will be the water and sewer demand of that particular business. So a typical retail needs to have bathrooms for the employees. When you go into a restaurant, it goes to a greater amount if they have...
It's per seat.
Per seat. And then if they're a catering business, and then if it's a brew pub, and what are the various things that you go through? Because there was one town, I think it was in Princeton, where they have a brewery, and it's what is the discharge and what is the contaminants within the wastewater that goes into that affects the treatment system.
Charlton.
Okay, thank you. So it goes to, once you have something available, then something can go there, but what is the demand that's going to be there? So clearly I was working with Carl on the IMA with Fitchburg, and we made sure that any of the houses or businesses that are not currently connected have an allocation, so they're guaranteed they can be connected for their current use. If you're going to get a greater amount, you need to look at that. So again, this is part of the data collection that we need to have for potential economic development.
And to that point of businesses knowing the capacity, that's something that could be in a permitting guidebook, right? Is the guidebook, so.
One of the things that I saw in the makeup of a potential economic development group or commission was at large, and they named several different, but one of the boards that wasn't mentioned was Board of Health. And I think one of the things that we've talked a lot about and what people want is these farm to table or restaurants or farms, and farms have some exemptions that other restaurants don't have. So I think it would be really important to include the Board of Health in these decisions, because they're going to have a lot of information about these things, as whether or not they can fly or not fly, and what we can do and what we can't do.
So we have Chris McDermott here, and this slide is about the role of the local chambers of commerce. So North Central Chamber of Commerce is one of our chambers that supports our area. The other is Neshoba Valley Chamber of Commerce. So they're a resource for networking, exchange of ideas, advocating at local, state, and federal levels, insurance advisory, market research, and small business loans. And maybe, Chris, if you can.
Very much. Thank you, Heather.
Yeah, she basically touched on most of it. Just to speak very briefly, we like to consider ourselves, the North Central Massachusetts Chamber in particular, a very dynamic chamber. We cover 17 communities within this region. We have roughly 900 members, which has allowed us to employ 10 full-time staff, obviously, myself included, and we're actually proud to say that we're one of 3 national finalists for Chamber of the Year last year. We're actually the first chamber ever from Massachusetts to be considered for that honor, and that was a big deal for us. So regarding some of what we do, just going through this, I remember you mentioned that when it comes to forming a local business association, one of the things you mentioned was public policy advocacy, outreach to legislators, outreach to local government. That is literally I'm the public affairs manager. That is literally my job. As Heather was mentioning, we host, I believe, over 130 events a year. So we're always promoting our members. We're always trying to make sure that we get the word out about the great businesses we have in the area. We also have two other organizations under our umbrella. We also staff the Johnny Appleseed Trail Association. We use that to promote the region via tourism, track investment that tourism brings into the region. We tracked that in 2004, I believe it was $14 million. In 2016, it had risen to about $131 million. So that's been a major boon to this region. And we also have the Development Corporation, which is an alternate lender. It provides small businesses and startups with loans. Through the regular fund, it can be a loan of up to $150,000 because we do loan to some of the small manufacturers in the region. We also have $5,000 express loans, which are small loans that we can approve or disapprove in a week. So if our members have an emergency of some sort, we can make sure that they don't actually have to turn to a credit card. And with these loans come technical assistance. SCORE works through us. Small Business Association also provides training. So we like to consider ourselves a resource, and if anybody has any questions for me regarding what we do or what our platforms are, I'd be happy to talk to you. Thanks, Heather. Absolutely.
Okay, so and something that was news to me as well is the town can become a member of the chamber. So in chambers, we could become members of both chambers.
And what if the town becomes a member, what does that mean? What are the advantages? What are the programs that we would be participating in? Or what does it mean?
The Chamber offers a number of training sessions. It's becoming aware of different resources for businesses that we can relay to them as well. The networking piece, they hold a number of events that would legislators are there as well to attend, and other businesses.
That seems like a wonderful step towards promoting our existing businesses and training session and offering resources to our existing businesses. I think that's something we absolutely should consider.
Yep. And also sends a message to our businesses in town that we support business.
If we did and we were to form an association or a committee, is that something that could we come to you for advice on those issues?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. My colleague David, for example, I have to remember to grab the microphone. My colleague David, he's one of our membership coordinators, and he brought Clinton on board as a member, and he is a member of Discover Clinton's board. Prior to this, I worked in Framingham, and I was a member of the Community Economic Development Division, and we were a member, the town was a member through my department with the Metro West Chamber, and it helped deepen that relationship. We were always on board with them, talking to them, organizing, if we were trying to organize an event, they would sometimes help us get the word out. So it was definitely a boon, and it's something that I think here we'd be happy to. If you were to build a business association of some kind, I'd be happy to liaise with you and see what I could do to help get the word out about your businesses.
Great, thank you.
How many communities belong to your organization?
To the chamber as members, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I know we represent 17. So 17 through the chamber, and then on the JEDA side, we represent all the way out to Orange. So that's 27. Of those communities on the JEDA side, those are communities that have room tax, so I'd have to check that number too.
So you don't know how many communities belong?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Now, how does membership work? Is there a cost associated?
It's a minimum cost, less than per
$100.
Okay, okay.
So another piece that we could do would be to do a survey to solicit public input. And what I'd like to hear feedback, if we will do this survey, is what type of information are we seeking feedback on? Are we looking to see if promoting ecotourism, farming, artist craft community appeals to people in town? The types of businesses that residents desire that are currently lacking? What are the perceived biggest challenge for Lunenburg to attract business, and do we want to attract business? The perceived best attributes Lunenburg should promote, and is there a desire to become a destination community or attract more commerce or not?
All of those.
Well, these are just talking points. Okay, but you're saying all of them. All of them. All of, yeah.
So one of the things I've been involved in various surveys over the years, and it's important not to create, which you wouldn't do, but you don't want to create a survey that gets the answer that you want. Mm-hmm. So I would look to possibly the chamber to see what sort of surveys that are out there to get this information already, so we don't have to reinvent it. I'll go with we need to make sure we get it to the people who are on computers, and we get it to people who are not on computers, people who watch TV and people who don't watch TV, and so it needs to get really way out there. But I think this is, when we talked about a lot in the first section, was do we want economic development? I think that Lunenburg does, but everybody has a different definition. So I think if we can do this to find out how does somebody define it, and maybe it's not call it economic development, but to call it what we think it's going to be. We can't just say it's in order to raise more tax dollars, other things like that, although some people may support it because of that. So I think that there have to be out there surveys about getting input from residents about the concept of economic development.
Yeah, it seems to me like a marketing research question. And is there any, I don't know, between Mr. Hume and the chamber, do you have any marketing staff that you can recommend to come up with an appropriate scheme for getting the answers to these questions? Or are you aware of any marketing firms that we could pursue? Thank you. The quality of the response is going to be key, you know what I mean?
We could do a preliminary market analysis, but that's outside of our expertise to do a full-blown market analysis. But we have something called Esri Business Analyst online that we could do a preliminary study for the town.
Not really looking for a survey, right, Dave? Help with a survey?
Help with this, yeah. What I need to we need to narrow in on what
questions we should ask. What questions we should be asking.
Yeah.
What do you want to know and how do you ask?
So we're really looking for help with a survey.
Okay, for the survey, yes, we could take a look at what other communities have done in terms of putting a survey together. I know that the town of Westminster has done one in the past, and a few other communities too. So we could take a look at that.
Great.
Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. As you're talking about surveys, I'm wondering, would it be prudent to take the 12 items in the previous report, put those out as a survey, and have the citizens of Lunenburg prioritize those 12 in their order of priority? At least we'd get some input on what the groups have brought together as ideas, and let the citizens prioritize them again and see what we come up with. Thank you.
I don't think you'd get enough information from that.
I don't think, the 12 points I really think are more tasks than questions. So like, for example, create an inventory of all commercial business and industrial parcels. That's a task versus a survey question, I think.
And the local option for lodging, we don't have any lodging.
My word of caution is that if you jump into a survey just thinking, I'm going to get a quick answer, I'm going to be done with it, you run the risk of there's more that goes into asking the right question. So you're just going to you may just get crazy information, that just doesn't fit where you're going. So I think it's a good place to ask a professional opinion on, can we get a survey together that's really going to give us
And if we can look at what Westminster did, I think that's a good thing, and potentially talk with the chamber about what they've done.
Hey, sure, Katie Adams, Williams Drive. With the survey, I'd really want to know it was done more like a census where we really took into consideration getting it to everybody almost on the same medium, something like a mailing that explains to people how to interact. So, I mean, almost everybody receives actual mail. Doesn't mean that's where the survey has to take place, but I want to make sure we're not surveying specific segments that fit into a category, that we're really setting up something that is reaching everybody who may not even know we're trying to reach them. I wouldn't want to miss a segment of town in terms of getting feedback on how people perceive town.
Yeah, I think we did that before, once before. I remember one coming out, and I think it came out with the warrant at one point. A few years ago, I remember it coming. So that, I think, probably does reach everyone. I also had, I feel the same way, and there's something that I'm a little concerned about. This is off topic, but when you're noticing in the community, you don't have to notice people who live in apartments or condos. You only have to notice the landowner. So not everyone gets noticed in a lot of situations, and that's something that's always been of concern to me, but something to think about moving forward as well.
So the warrant,
a lot of people in like the high rises that might never hear of anything, you know.
So the warrant goes to households where there is a registered voter. So that's where the warrant goes. Tax bills go to property owners, and they may or may not be the same. So as was talked about, we need to get to the residents of town, and however we do it, we need to get it in a way that we get a response back. At the same time, we have to be aware of what the cost is. So, but 7,500 households is about $3,000 worth of expense. It's important to spend money to get a good response. So that's part of designing the survey. How do you get the information?
One option might be to do a postcard to alert people of the survey and where it is, whether in printed copy or online copy. That would save cost if we were to do something like that versus sending the survey out. We do have to keep cost in mind, but I agree that we don't want to target one particular area. We want to get it to everybody.
Yeah, I think, if I remember correctly, Marion Benson sent out that one with the warrant by mail, and I feel like we got less than 100 respondents from the whole town. So it was not an incredibly effective
Not everybody
way.
reads the warrant.
Yeah, not an incredibly effective way to get input is mailing it out.
But again, we want to give the people the opportunity, whether they choose to exercise it or not is another thing, so we can actually say we've reached out. But if that's not an effective medium, we need to find a different medium.
I don't know if it's survey or education, but one of the things that I always wonder about is we ask if people want economic development and all this, and I'm not sure that they have enough information. The question I'd almost like to ask, if they say, yes, we want more economic development, is why? Because I think there may be some misperceptions out in the world that, economic development is going to lower my taxes. And if that's why, it would be good to know that that's why. Or in the education side, I think it would be good to get some information out to people to let them know what the potential impact to taxes are with economic development. I mean, we have a relative to the neighborhoods around us, based on the 2013 draft, we're in pretty good shape. We get a lot of revenue, more than most of the communities around us from commercial and industrial. It's a pretty good percentage of our revenue, relatively speaking. You'd have to increase that an awful lot to have much of an impact, and I don't know that people know that. I think they just presume economic development means lowering my taxes, and it's not clear. So I think whether it be education or making sure the question is asked in such a way that they're not presuming an outcome of economic development that isn't realistic.
I think that's a good point that Carl just made, and I equate that to our visioning session last week. We spent the first half of the meeting talking about, things we'd like to have. But then at the end of the meeting, we stepped back and Adam asked us, okay, what actually makes you, what's a space that makes you happy? And got some, things that we're trying to achieve versus, things that we want. And that's kind of what you want to, I think we should identify as what's the town actually looking for, holistically, not just do you want a garage over here or a place Dunkin' Donuts there, because that's not going to help either. But understanding, what the end result is desired to be is what will help.
Yeah, if I may, that's the way, when you say economic development, I understand that there's a fear out there that, people are thinking large scale, but I always think of it more as building community. It's the infrastructure that goes into building a community that you're happy to live in, that you're comfortable walking on, that you're visiting, and the infrastructure is there to make that happen. The signage is there, the walking is there, the parking is there. Everything's there to enjoy it. And you have places to hold community events, They do a lot of that in a lot of parts of Maine, and it's they do a really nice job of it, integrating with all those elements.
Just one thing I'd like to kind of bring us back in a way. We could craft a very detailed, multiple question survey, and to Carl's point, depending on people's perception of what economic development is and what's in it for them, they'll answer it certain ways. I would be thrilled if we got the answer to those questions from a majority of the town. I don't need any detailed, what businesses do you like, but just to know what's the biggest challenge for Lunenburg to attract businesses, what's the best attribute of the town that you'd like to promote, is there a desire to become a destination community? That's important. Mm-hmm. And then if we get a positive on any of them, you can drill down on, would you rather have A, B, or C? Mm-hmm. That's just my point.
That's why when I said all of the above, I think all of those questions are the things that I'd really like to know from the community. Is there an interest in doing these things? And what is it that they want out of economic development? And I think those questions, maybe there's a couple more, but I think those questions really frame that discussion.
But I would say we have to go and look at how we actually ask the question, because asking about a destination community, that's a term of art that a lot of people aren't going to understand, and I don't want people to come to my community. Well, okay, destination community for trails is a different discussion than I'm going to come here for a entertainment plaza or a casino. So the answer is, I agree with you that these are getting to that point, but we have to be very careful that we give enough education in there with not too much to turn them off, but at the same time let them be more, not ABC, but maybe more flowing questions, sort of like essay instead of multiple choice.
Well, I would caution against essay, and the reason I say that is because it's very difficult to compile those responses. I mean, and I'm just speaking of the survey we did for the cable advisory. SurveyMonkey has a great tool where you can really see the percentages, and it can graph them and give you a real good understanding. But when you get to essays, that tool is not available, because it's very interpretive what the person is saying. So I would be very careful. I agree, and I see what you're saying when you said that. So maybe, is there a desire to become a destination community for A, B, C, D, E? And maybe they pick what they, know, or then I'd like to see people come for, and then, so I think we've got to, I would, certainly some essay questions are appropriate, but if, hopefully we have hundreds of people respond to this, compiling that's going to be difficult.
We're trying to design the survey that we shouldn't be. We're trying to get to, what do we want? We want the answers, these questions. There needs to be a way to get it that gives people the ability to provide feedback for what's there, but also give them the opportunity to comment about things that are not there because we didn't think about another thing.
Right. But
that's what I
would
meant
agree
by
with
essay, is that you have to give them the opportunity to comment.
I do agree with Mr. Solo, if you can answer that. Think of this as like you're seeding, to use an agricultural term. You're seeding this thing, and you just need to get the basics down first, and then hand it off. If we have a development team at some point, let them dig down.
Exactly.
So zoning and bylaw changes, are there any immediate zoning or bylaw changes that are necessary to accomplish short-term goals, if any? So that's just a question posed.
I don't know if you're asking this. I mean, I don't see any right now. I mean, I think we're a long way from zoning changes. I think the Village Center District does a lot within this area. There may be areas that flush out as we go, but I don't think we're there yet, myself.
I think, well, to me, possibly a simple thing that could go a long way to helping small business and home businesses, just taking a look at how home business is identified in the residential districts, and make sure that it's accommodating everything that these people need.
And the sign bylaw.
And the sign bylaw, too.
Bylaw.
But, yeah, just as I'm sure there's plenty of home businesses the town doesn't even know about that aren't registered, that may or may not conform with what zoning laws we even have. So taking a look at that, making sure it's accommodating, I mean...
We are trying to get the use table together for next town meeting. So we're going to be diligently working on that for the next couple of meetings and trying to get something ready for town meeting. So that will help. And in the coming month, January, if anyone has any input, whether by email, phone, or come in and share it, we can go through there.
What about the sign bylaw?
The sign bylaw keeps getting kicked down the road, but...
That was one of the biggest complaints or concerns that we've heard.
Yes, I know, yeah, especially in the center.
Yeah.
Although they did get a permit to put a sign at the village.
Yeah,
so.
which is a good thing.
That's a good start.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll have to see where it fits in. There's a lot on the table right now.
I think that we need to update our zoning map to reflect our improvements in infrastructure. And not only that, I mean, we've got an office park industrial area that doesn't have any sewer. I'm not sure that it even has water. It must have water because actually Keating's has a whole bunch of their own wells. So in office park and industrial, how are we going to get that without the infrastructure? Okay, so, and we've also got a whole bunch of residential A, residential B, and various other areas that have sewer, and they are only utilizing it for residential purposes. So it's a great thing for residents. It avoids a mound if you need to sell your property or you need to upgrade your system. But the infrastructure, it goes hand in hand with development of commerce, commercial and economic and business and whatnot. You need to have the infrastructure behind in place before you're going to start to attract any kind of business or anything really. So I think that we need to. I think it's been well over 10 years since we've updated the zoning map, aside from the Village Center District, and I think that should be looked at as well.
So I would actually disagree to the point where before we put sewer in and hope they will come, I think we need to know what we want to come into town. Mm-hmm. So I think that's usually what towns have done, to put water and sewer into an industrial park, and that's going to be what we want. It's like, well, what type of business do we want to have and where do we want it? So I think we need to have that discussion before we decide where we're going to extend sewer and water. That's where
Right, but yeah. At the same time, we have, again, this area on Chase Road we just talked about. It's zoned commercial, but there's no water, no sewer, no gas. Nobody's ever going to do that there. So, I mean, it may be, you at least could admit to ourselves that that's not going to happen, and, maybe zone is something more appropriate. But then, like Matt's saying, there are areas that would support business, that are on busy roads, that could do these things for us that aren't being utilized. So
yeah, I think it's going to, there's going to be a lot of back and forth and play between the two, because if we do decide to be ecotourist or whatever we're going to do, you're going to need B&Bs and things of that nature, or you're going to have to at least ease up on some of your laws to allow people who are already homeowners to convert their homes into businesses, or that kind of thing. So a lot of it's going to flow out of what we decide, I think. So,
and that's where I say you have to decide where you want to grow, as opposed to say we're going to grow everywhere.
Right. Yeah.
Do you want to have a large hotel in a rural road, as opposed to a place where there's already infrastructure? The good planning says it needs to be where there's already resources, whereas hopefully maybe we'll have bus lines and parking and sidewalks and everything else like that. So I think that We need to decide what we want, and then we need to see what resources we need to have to do that, and then decide to do that, as opposed to, let's just put sewer everywhere, water everywhere. And I know that's not what you're saying, but we just need to decide what we want to do. And that's part of the survey, is that, you could have a question, would you be willing to have a bed and breakfast next to your house? Are you ready to have a gas station next to your house? That's the type of question that you get an answer to.
I think that was my point, is that the zoning flows out of what you're trying to accomplish. Right. So we would support whatever we need to support.
And I don't think our bylaws address it either, or I'm not sure how they would, but maybe even Airbnb type things, online rentals of properties that exist that could, provide places for people to stay to do the ecotourism without, a big hotel or something like that, or invasive, hospitality.
But that's something, that's a great example, but that's something that's also causing a lot of chaos in a lot of communities, and they're starting to look at that.
Well, I mean, we should address it one way or another, because I'm sure we don't say anything about it at all right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So what are we currently working on? Right now, we are we're working on moving to e-permitting, which will be easier for our businesses to do business in Lunenburg. That will streamline the process. They'll be able to check the status of their permits and licenses online. And the goal is to, 1, streamline, and 2, make it easier for towns or businesses to do business in town. The website, we're in the design phase right now for the website, and the design incorporates having a business section with a directory and a map of all the existing businesses that fill out the Google form to be listed in that directory. The use of the TC Pasio's kitchen. We're working with the Board of Health and the Sewer Commission to address permitting the TC Pasio's kitchen for commercial use. In the future, it could be a community kitchen for more than one local business. So it's something we're exploring and trying to figure out the permitting process for that to happen. Complete streets. We're starting the process of looking at projects that would increase walkability and accessibility. So we had a meeting recently with public officials, the DPW director, the police chief, the fire chief, the school superintendent, myself, the land use director, with our consultant, just to start at a starting point of where are areas in town where there's sidewalks to nowhere, or we need to improve access to a certain area. Such as right here out front of the building, and down on Oak Ave, that triangle location. So there's lots of locations that were identified at that meeting, and we're going to have a public forum on January 9th to solicit more input from the public on different areas in town. So some possible action steps: the selectmen could appoint an economic development committee. The planning board could appoint the master plan committee. The sewer commission, I believe they have a written master plan that addresses future growth and development in town. A survey could be done by the town manager, apply for the next round of DLTA funding that we talked about tonight that could do the permitting directory, or sorry, permitting guidebook, and a brochure possibly that MRPC could put together that we could use for an online and physical copy. The land use director will continue working with various committees towards completion of these plans. So. Yes. Sorry.
I just wanted, before we leave that, as a sewer commissioner, I'm not sure what that means. We have what we call a master plan, which is a CWMP. It addresses development as the town had identified development. Until the town changes their position and comes up with an updated master plan, I don't personally feel there's anything that the sewer commission should be doing. So maybe I'm missing something.
So that was working into the master plan when that's redone. Sewer commission, yeah.
Okay, updating our...
Working with the planning board on the updated master plan.
Correct.
So the other question I have, and I don't know if, I can't remember the section, I thought there was a provision, and I don't know if we want to do this or not, but coordination of the permitting process for when people have to get various approvals, to have a consolidated hearing process instead of having to go to the sewer, to planning, to the ZBA, land use, Board of Health, Conservation, and to have one master hearing where all the issues get addressed at the same time, so you have to go, don't bounce back and forth because they have competing demands, not negating any one board's obligation under their charge, but to have one consolidated hearing would, I think, would help the public, let alone the applicant.
Yeah, an expedited permitting process.
We're supposed to have 3 boards meeting tonight, aren't we? We've got 2 boards that don't have quorum. I mean, you're going to have an applicant come to get a permit and have all the issues addressed in one night by all the boards that are supposed to be here?
That's the concept of the expedited hearing process, so that you make one presentation, everybody gets to ask questions, and then you have to answer all the questions as an applicant. But when you're going to say, I'm going to put this sewer line down here, and oh, by the way, it's going through a wetlands, okay, can we move it here? Well, that's not allowed by the Sewer Commission because it's not allowed this way. And, DPW doesn't allow it this way, so that everybody gets to talk about it. It's a little bit like what's being done now, technically, where there's a tech review by the various departments, but it's basically allowing one process instead of making public go to all the different hearings and make the applicants have to spend a lot of time going to all the different hearings. And I've seen things go back and forth between the boards. Well, they said this, but we require this, and so trying to get people to talk together.
Yeah, I just want to 100% support what you're saying, Bob, because I've lived it on various boards and watched the applicants go from one board I'm on to another board I'm on and just go round and round, and what happens is you lose the thread. One board asks to change something on this print, the next thing you know, we've already approved a print on a different board, so it really is, it's cumbersome for the applicants, it's really painful, and it's painful for the commissions, and you lose the thread, and you end up with something at the end that the boards have approved different things, and then you're really in a mess. So I absolutely 100% agree. There's got to be better coordination between the commissions, and not that anyone would ever do this, but it sometimes it can get used against the commissions also. Well, this board approved this, so why won't you approve it?
I can't speak for the board, but this is the first I've heard of this. We've been working on something similar, with our own board, just cleaning up the process for people and trying to streamline things with a pre-submission process that they go through and get some guidance. But
in some, just in one particular area that I'm thinking of, an applicant went through a painful thing between the planning and the conservation over the stormwater mitigations. They both have responsibilities over that. The 2 boards didn't quite ask the applicants to do the same things, and it became a problem. So that one particular one would have been very helpful to have the 2 boards on the same page, on the same bench with the applicant, and just work it out instead of the 5 times it took.
It's Mass General Laws, Chapter 43D, expedited permits.
Permitting.
So we can all do our homework and look at that.
I think what that addresses too, it gives a certain time frame. You have to act within so many days. Just one comment on the communication between commissions and what e-permitting software will, one of the goals too is every department, you'll be able to see where they're at in the process. There can be comments on the process. So that will hopefully help improve communications across boards as well and commissions.
Yeah, I see that, collaborative approval process working better in a municipality where they have department heads as opposed to boards all trying to get 30 people in a room, because we've tried to do we've done meetings with everyone together, and they're good to get everyone's opinion, but it's not the most productive meeting in the world either. So I like the idea, and maybe it's more of Adam clearly has an understanding of what goes on because he's in on those technical meetings. He's taking all that information in and advising the applicant to some degree, and also advising the board. So it's a little bit of him, I think, a little bit of him, staying involved the way he does, but also the board's, taking a little bit more direction from him, saying, okay, we've coordinated this with this conservation or the sewer or something like that, and just understanding that he has been there and he is doing some of this coordination and taking a lot of that into their decision-making process. Relying more on him as a resource can help clear things up.
Yeah, one of my concerns is, from a statutory standpoint, each board is looking at things differently. So I think it might be a blend of the expedited permitting process and the continued hearings, and I'm not sure what it will shake out to be, but, I've been to Conservation Commission meetings, I've been to planning board meetings. They're looking at very different aspects of the permit. And, it's going to be very important, and when we talk about department heads, it's going to be very important for those appointed or elected board members to still be able to contribute to the process. And my concern is if we have one hearing and we try to get everybody in the same room, they're going to all come in with different aspects that they're looking at, and I'm just not sure how it will work. And I think that this could turn into a marathon meeting process, and trying to get, as someone just said, trying to get everybody on the same night is difficult. And so I'm a little bit concerned.
Or even the follow-up tech meeting. It's like they have the initial one before they go to any of the boards, but if they have one meeting with all the boards and then have a follow-up tech meeting.
The problem with that is the people that are at the tech meetings aren't, and I've seen this at some of the Conservation Commission meetings, the people that are at the tech meetings aren't necessarily the people that are voting. And so no one can predict how someone else is going to view a plan. So they may go to a tech meeting, come away with one direction, and then the commission looks at it and says, wait a minute, you didn't consider this, and then that whole direction goes a different way. So I appreciate the value of the tech meetings, but it doesn't take away the authority of the appointed or elected official, and sometimes that direction changes completely.
I just want to clarify. I agree with your points, Paula. And I don't know what the solution is, but communications has got to be improved. I wasn't envisioning group meetings with the applicant. What I've been advocating for a while and haven't been able to make happen is some joint meetings of the boards that are involved to sit around a table, whatever, once a quarter, whatever, and say, these are the things before us. Are there any overlap? Are there any common concerns? Because there are overlaps. Stormwater is one between planning and conservation that I've run into. I've run into with Board of Health and Conservation when it comes to septic within areas of a wetland. The Board of Health, has certain things, and they'll allow a certain thing, and maybe the Conservation doesn't want that close to the wetland. So there are a couple of areas that could be addressed with the board sitting down, not necessarily with the applicant. That would be a mess, I think.
I think this also goes to my point earlier about policy. It would seem simple to a lot of people that if you're in the sewer service area and you have sewer running in front of your house or your business, that then you get sewer. But there's still a lot of questions around that and how to calculate some of the fees that are involved in getting sewer or connecting to sewer. So I think if you develop those policies and you have hard and fast rules about certain things, then it makes it simple and easy for those applicants. Because we have a lot of times where the service or the sewer business manager is asked the question over and over again, and she spends time calculating this stuff. And it's all in print in our regulations. It's all in print somewhere. But then there's always that question, well, can the sewer commission do this or that? And everyone's looking to pay less money if they can. But if we have policies that dictate that, then there's no sense in having an additional meeting or having a meeting to come up with a formula or to come up with something that's different. So I think that's where we can help, or at least the sewer can help streamline the process.
How would boards go about having quarterly meetings? How would that work?
Well, the question is whether you're going to have quarterly meetings about communication, or you're going to have quarterly meetings to deal with a particular project. I think that goes to part of the thing is that you'd have meetings at least to say, here's our approach of how we should be doing. So let's take stormwater. Here's our policy. an applicant, what I've ever heard anybody talk about economic development and a business person coming in is they want certainty. I don't care that your taxes are high, just tell me what the taxes are. I don't care that your utilities are high, although they don't like it, but I want to know what it is. I want to come into the town and want to know what's going to happen. I don't want to have to get bounced like a ping pong ball from board to board to board to know what's going on. At the same time, as a citizen, I want to make sure that all those boards are doing their job and making sure that I'm protected. But if there's a policy that's there to say, here's what's going to happen if you're going to apply for a sewer permit or a water withdrawal permit or a conservation permit, here's what you should be doing.
It goes back to this permitting guidebook that you're talking about.
Yeah, so beyond the guide, you're going beyond the guide. You want to have, you're saying the guide's not good enough. You want to have.
The guide's good, but we're talking about discretion of boards, which is important because a parcel is going to be different, and I don't want to take discretion away. But if there's a policy that everybody agrees on, here's what it's going to be, then that should be the standard that everybody should understand, and therefore it needs to be clarified in a policy, in a guideline, in a bylaw, or whatever, and everybody needs to go with it. If not even that, the concept of the expedited permit, even if it's not that, maybe an initial permit presentation to everybody, and everybody gets to see it at the same time, everybody gets to ask the initial questions, then everybody hears the things that may trigger, which communication does. If Carl says something, Katie may hear something and want to say something different, Damon's going to say something, I'm going to say something different. It's a dynamic experience instead of conservation focuses on theirs, not knowing that the Board of Health is going to say something over there.
Well, to build on that, I deal with developers all the time, and you're right. They want they want a surety that what they expect to happen is going to happen. But the biggest thing that bothers them is if it's in your bylaws and it's allowed and they're doing those things, they should get an approval. So boards following the bylaws and guidelines that are there and not reading between the lines and not asking for extra, that's what pisses them off. Because if they come in with a plan that does everything in the bylaws and they don't get an approval, that's what's going to turn them off immediately. So really
agreeing on what the bylaw says.
Yeah, agreeing what the bylaw says and coming to a consensus and approving a plan based on what the bylaw is and not what you think it should be is huge.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm a firm believer in implementing the bylaws, regulations. Where we get in trouble a lot, though, and happens more often than not, unfortunately, is the exceptions, the waivers. That's where we internally get in trouble. I think with the developer, you're exactly right. If you could say, look, that's the regulation, do it and you're fine, you should have no problem. It's when the boards start to get into case by case, one of my favorites, and start making exceptions. So conservation makes an exception that the applicant can do something, but Board of Health says no. And so you're not on the same page anymore. That's the trickier place where communication has to come into play, and resolving these kinds of issues. If you stuck to the bylaws and the regulations, life would be a lot simpler.
Yeah, right.
For everybody.
If they're not asking for a waiver, they should know what the outcome's going to be.
Exactly.
And again, back to the bylaws, it shouldn't be such where people are asking for the same waiver all the time. And we've cleaned things up like that with the planning board in the past, where the one that everyone asked for that waiver. That shouldn't even be there, so you're not discussing
I think you're going to run into trouble if you try to impose your views on another board when it's their job to interpret that particular bylaw. So you got to be careful for that.
Well, I'm not saying you would do
we're
that.
saying the board should all be on the same page and be clear what the bylaw, agree what the bylaw. Right. I'll tell you, the conservation just did this recently, I think last year. There was a bylaw or a regulation that said no structure within the 50-foot offset to a wetland. And there was a whole discussion because some people interpreted the structure this way and some people looked at it as structure this way. So they had a lot of meetings and a lot of dialogue about what exactly a structure is. So now they're very clear and they've cleaned up the bylaw that says this is what a structure is. So I think that's what you're talking about, is agreeing on what the bylaw says.
But I'll go back to my days on the planning board when there was a subdivision that came through us off of Autumn Road, off of Reservoir Road.
Autumn Road?
Autumn Road. So they came for a waiver of the sidewalk requirement because there were no sidewalks on Reservoir Road, and you're going to make us put a sidewalk on a short street. The planning board determined at that time that they would waive that requirement. Now, it's been controversial since, because if you waive that in every single subdivision, you're never going to have sidewalks anywhere. So I don't know if that's been changed or not, but by its nature, a developer will come in for as many waivers as they can, because it will reduce their cost. If we enforce every single requirement, we're going to increase the cost of development, and they're not going to have any development. So it's a balance there for what's going on and what is required, the subdivision requirements, the conservation requirements. Our conservation requirements are stricter than the state's requirements because we've chosen that we're going to protect our wetlands more appropriately for Lunenburg. There's a cost to that. But if it's more consistent with how it's implemented, then it's going to be easier to do that. The joint meeting will enhance communication. I'm not talking about taking away any rights from any of the things the boards.
No, I can only speak for myself. I agree. I think that subjectivity, the less subjectivity you have, the better.
And if you,
that's what applicants are doing. They just want a guideline. I just said, give me the guideline.
Should I bring this up? Yeah. Sorry.
no, I'm just thinking something like stormwater. You should be able to, different boards should be able to agree on a set of stormwater regulations that everyone can live with, I would think.
I think we're working the issues. So can we bring it up a notch?
So going back to the goals that we hope to achieve at the beginning. If there could be some kind of consensus of next steps. We know we have to do a master plan update, an open space plan update. Let's move that process along, make those appointments. If the board agrees, there's some value in creation of an economic development committee. Let's move that process along as well.
And I don't think we're there yet unless we actually have a charge for that committee of what they're going to do. Because right now, we don't know what economic development is yet. I believe that we need to have a committee, such a committee, to implement what we decide we're going to do, because we need to get it out of the Board of Selectmen and get it to a broader thing. But I don't think we're there yet unless we're going to charge them with doing the work that we're doing now, and I think we need to still own it before we give it over to a committee.
And I would agree with that, but I do want to do, I would like to see some concrete things. So, like joining the Chamber of Commerce, is that something we can do now?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to, I hope we're going to do
Yes.
that? Okay, the Economic Development Committee, I would agree with Bob. I think we've got to do some more legwork before and doing the survey and sending that out and getting that feedback so that at least they have some guideline of what it is that we're looking for them to do.
Yeah, we don't have their mission yet.
Right.
Yeah,
I would say if we can collect other Economic Development Committee charges, then we can start looking at what have other towns already done, and then we can say, all right, no, I didn't think of it that way. Maybe that'd be the way. So we start doing our work on that to collect of what we would actually do to establish it.
One of the goals in the MRPC report is support local agricultural resources. And at the last charrette we had, there was a lot of ideas about more targeted charrettes, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think that one thing that I'd like to see happen is a meeting with our farmers and our agricultural people. I know we did the local businesses, but we keep talking about this, farmers or crafters or artists. I'd like to see a meeting of that targeted audience. Obviously, it would be open to the public, but really see if we can get their involvement and their buy-in, because if they're not interested, we're kind of just going around in a circle. So I'd like to see a targeted meeting, a targeted charrette with that group, or similar to what you did for the business meeting. I'd also like to look at continuing that charrette process. What is our next charrette going to be? Because I think we need to continue the momentum. And I think I do think we need to hand this over to an economic development committee. And I agree with the makeup that you proposed, but I think we've got a couple more months of work before we can do that.
And one thing about the charrette, we have lovely people come to the charrettes, but it's pretty much the same people. I think before we schedule another charrette, we figure out how we're going to get more voices in the conversation.
Unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to get a ton of people in the conversation, and we did see I saw some new faces, not all new faces, but some new faces. I think we have to advertise better. I think we absolutely have to advertise a lot better. I think we've got to get it in the paper, we've got to get it on the website, we've really got to, but I'm encouraged with the amount of people that are here. I'm encouraged that people are staying involved, and we've just got to, like you said, we've got to keep that momentum going.
I feel we did advertise. There were articles.
It wasn't on the website till Tuesday afternoon, the day before the charrette.
And we did advertise it. We did talk about it at
We
town
needed a meeting location for that particular one, the town facilities.
I'm just saying
okay.
That's not enough time.
But the newspaper did run articles on that. They're very thankful for that to get the word out. It was sent to Facebook pages. The first meeting of the public forum was sent to 400 businesses.
Yeah.
And
I'm not finding fault. The charrette, because we didn't have a meeting space, and we certainly did announce it during the meetings. I mean, we announced it December 2nd and December 7th, and we did that consistently. It certainly was in articles. At town meeting, I made a point to mention the 2nd and the 7th, as did you in your slideshow. So certainly but if we can get it out to more people to get more involvement, I think that would be a good thing. But, personally, I'd really like to, we keep talking about the agriculture and the artists and the arts, and we really need to find out if there's buy-in from those people.
And I'd like to, moving on to the next point, is that Carol talked about the sewer commission. We're talking about which comes first, chicken or the egg. I would ask that the sewer commission start some discussion on this, of assuming that the town comes up with, we want to expand some development somewhere in town, what will be your process by which the sewer commission would respond to that? Not necessarily give us an answer yet, because we don't know what we're going to be asking yet. But I think there's the value to revisit that. I also, as a chair of the Charter Commission, I also asked the sewer commission to look at section where the current language says we will sewer the entire town effectively, that we should revisit that. Is that something that should stay in the charter or not?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Bob. I think that from our discussion before, that should say something more effective input from the sewer commission on the town's master plan. And certainly, I think the sewer commission has to work with the land use boards to create that plan. I think I wouldn't advocate that we're waiting for the town to hand us a plan and then we'll go tell you the impact. I think it's critical that the sewer commission provide information into that of what the impact of that decision might be, what the pros and cons are, and just more from an information into the process. And then whatever the result is, then the sewer commission needs a process to deal with that and update their comprehensive wastewater plan. But the first step is work with the relevant boards to come up with a plan and provide our inputs into that plan, I think.
And I would make a pitch to add in the Lunenburg Water District into the master plan, even though it's not a town department. Water is going to be important. And actually, water is more important than sewer.
Yeah. One question that I have, and it's a discussion I used to have with Marion Benson all the time, about the updates to the master plan, and the kind of roadblock to that was the financial piece of it, because my understanding, or at least from Marion, was that it was very costly to update the entire master plan. And I know that the planning board was working on components of updates of the master plan. So what is it that we're looking to do? Are we looking, because this is going to take a long time. I mean, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. So what are the thoughts from the land use director and from the planning board on updating the master plan and their timeline? Same with the open space plan. Our open space plan was excellent, but I know the open space committee hasn't met in a long time. Do we still have an open space committee? And is that group still interested in meeting, and are they all still being interested in being on? And what's the cost of doing that update?
I think we've actually lost a number, just for education. And we still meet whenever it's necessary to use
a parcel, a purchase,
or whatever. Yeah.
I think this becomes the chicken and the egg discussion, because if I bring us back to the meeting, the infamous meeting we always talk about, where we were starting to update a portion of the master plan, and we we're at a place where we said, well, we have to identify what the town wants to be and what our overarching goals are as a town before you can build a master plan. And one of the major missing pieces was economic development. So here we are again. It's one of the reasons we made it a goal. I think as you have these charrettes, as you get input, as you get a little closer to answering some of these questions, it becomes more evident. But what we're hearing is that there's a piece of the master plan that hasn't been done in 12 years. We need to work on that and find out what the right questions are. There's a piece of the open space plan that's due to get worked on. We need to start spending some energy on that. But what we're here to do tonight, and what we've been doing with the charrettes on communication and facilities planning and everything else, is to try to define what it is we're trying to do, what it is we want as a town. And it gets difficult when you have a small number of people inputting to that. Totally agree. But it is what it is. It's what we have.
So I think to me, the survey is the critical thing that we need to get going. To me, that's going to be the survey, and then, depending on the results of that survey, but also having charrettes that ask those same questions.
The survey may identify the charrettes that need to be done.
Right, but
I would settle for the survey where you said all of the above.
Yeah,
not a detailed survey. Just those 5 or 6 questions. Maybe that's the next step. And maybe that'll drive what do we do.
So maybe, since we're not ready to hand it over to someone else, maybe what we need to do is if Heather can send out that slide, if Bob has input,
No, it's too soon to send out that slide and ask questions. We need to develop a survey that asks questions in a way that we get the input that we want.
Well, Jamie was just saying, I'm happy with those questions.
Yeah,
so.
I understand that, but the fact is there's problems with some of the way the questions are written right now. So I would say that the town manager is charged with getting the appropriate resources to develop a survey, and we can look at it, or we can have a subcommittee look at the survey to get the thing, because I don't think we shouldn't be micromanaging it as the board.
Well, but we can't say we don't want to micromanage it as the board and keep putting it back on the town manager either. So we can't say we don't.
Ask her to do it and then bring it back to us for review.
But she's looking for guidance from us, is my understanding. I mean, she's done something and put together, and now she's recommending an.
That wasn't a survey. Those were questions we need to answer, but those aren't survey questions that are scientifically appropriate to ask people.
Okay.
Okay, maybe my point is, let's just answer those questions and then develop a survey.
What do you mean by answer the questions?
Could we put that slide up again?
We're going to be a destination. Do you believe to be a destination community? That's not an appropriate question to ask the townspeople at the moment, because it doesn't give them information of what that means.
Well, maybe we have a meeting like this to have that.
Town manager?
I think I can work on that and develop that more as far as what are some bullet points that we can have under that. So people, you can assume by their answer what they think a destination community is. Does that involve trails? Does that involve a casino with options? And that will show you what their feelings on becoming a destination community or not. And I agree. I think I can work something out, bring it back to the board, and we can review it from there.
So we don't have to ask anybody there, do you not want development? So that's what I'm saying, is that right now, this is saying we want economic development in town.
Right.
And we haven't gotten to that point. Do you want it? But we don't want to ask it in that question, because if you would say, do you want economic development, they say yes, because I'm going to lower taxes, or no, because I don't want Walmart. That's not the appropriate question. So what I'm saying is that there are surveys that are already out there that we should be able to grab and answer these questions. But these aren't the questions.
It could be, how do you define economic development, X, Y, and Z, as far as options?
So maybe we can get this. John mentioned that they have, Westminster just did it. If you can work with MRPC, and then maybe, either, 2 meetings out or whatever, because I think we need to get this out, because otherwise I feel like we're just spinning our wheels, and I don't want to lose the momentum we have. So if we can get the survey done, get it to us in a format that we can all agree on and get it out there. In my opinion, that's step one, because then we can get some feedback on where people want us to go, and hopefully at that point we can appoint an economic development committee, because we've done some more legwork behind what it is that we're trying to move towards.
So I think we've accomplished just about all our goals.
Okay.
I think we've agreed that we're not ready to change the zoning to do what we did tonight. The planning board's already working on changing the zoning to update it. And
You want to go back to your slide?
join the Chamber of Commerce and do the survey.
There were 2 chambers of commerce that we were available to, right?
Yes.
And doing one or both? Or?
To be fair to both, probably both.
If they cover the town.
So, as I said, I'd like to do the targeted, I'd like to have a discussion with the agricultural arts and I'd like to really try to put together some format, whether it be a charrette, whether it be a workshop, I don't know, or just a public, brainstorming session. And I'd like to determine the level of interest in that. I'd also like to talk with conservation. We talk about the trails, and to me, our trails are an absolute gem. But historically, years ago, there had been a resistance from the Conservation Commission to make those trails public, because they didn't necessarily want it to become everybody to be able to come to the trails. So I'd like to have that discussion with the Conservation Commission. In fact, several years ago, MRPC was putting together, I was on the MRTC, which is Montechusett Regional Trails Coalition, and there was resistance from the Lunenburg Conservation Commission about GPSing the trails to incorporate into the regional map of trails. So our trails, there's one little tiny segment on the map. So I'd really like to find out from the Conservation Commission, is there an interest and a support of making those trails accessible for all? Because that's a key piece.
And we should be including the Recreation Department, the Park Department, for the process as well.
I feel we have some good starting points after tonight's meeting.
What would be the outreach from the Conservation Commission to find out whether or not the town wants that?
That's a good question.
See, that's the way I was interpreting, and maybe we're agreeing and we don't know it. That's the way I was interpreting that whole destination community. What goes through my mind is, do we want economic development for the purpose of attracting people to come to Lunenburg? Or do we want economic development to provide services to people that live in Lunenburg? And that shapes...
That's a big question.
That shapes which businesses, how much you support them, what the purpose is, whether it has a tax impact or whether it's a service component. Because I frankly, this is my personal opinion, is I don't think economic development is going to tip the tax scales at all.
Right.
But I do think it may tip the service delivery to our town residents.
I agree.
And that's something worth working on. And that's the kind of question that I was driving. And when we talked about trails and that kind of stuff, it gets there.
So we need to develop that question in a way that people will understand what it means.
Right. Agreed. And frankly, we haven't asked, so this is not a criticism. I spoke the other night about passionate people coming forward as a group with a plan. Inviting the arts community or inviting the farming community is a great first step, but I really think it's up to them if they want to do something to get some passion together, get a plan together. I mean, this is not a town thing. This is we recognize it's an asset of the town. Do you folks want us to develop it?
And how can we help you?
And how can we help you?
The only thing is, though, we do have a town agricultural committee, so we do have a town committee already, so it's our responsibility if we identify it, as you said, what can we do to support it? And we may need to put money in to help support a consultant to come up with things that may need to be there. So.
Oh.
That's all I have.
Is that it?
Yep.
Okay, is there any At the risk of another hour, is there any public input to this workshop portion? We'll finish our meeting and have public comment, but can we wrap the workshop portion? Thank you very much. And thank you, Heather. And Adam had to leave for a family emergency, but I know Adam and Heather and MRPC have done a lot of work on this, and thank you very much for that.
You're welcome to stay, but you're welcome to leave if you want.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Emma.
Okay. You ready to move?
Yes.
Okay, under interviews, appointments, reappointments, I think this is an informational issue. We have received the resignation of Craig Bittner from Capital Planning Committee, School Building Committee, and the Green Communities Task Force effective December 6, 2017. Now, I know his seats on Capital Planning and School Building were as representatives of the planning board, so it's really their responsibility to replace. I don't know, I think the Green Communities Task Force was probably an appointment by us.
It is.
The Capital Planning Committee, the Planning Board did make that appointment at their meeting on Monday. They appointed Matt Allison to the Capital Planning Committee. The School Building Committee, they appointed Kenneth. And the Green Communities Task Force was a liaison from the board, so it's not an appointment.
So these are just informational then?
Okay.
Our current business, do we have any minutes? We don't?
No.
Okay. Warrants? Okay. I have a accounts payable warrant in the amount of $537,158.20. A payroll warrant in the amount of $812,563.30. And an accounts payable warrant in the amount of $638,320.18. Any action file issues? Okay. We don't have any committee reports this evening. Our upcoming schedule, we have our next meeting in December is the 19th. We have the January 2nd meeting and the January 9th meeting. Is there any public comment from the public? Any public comment from the board?
Motion we adjourn?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.